Welcome to this week's episode of the CPG View, the number one CPG information source for global omni-channel leaders. We'd like to give a quick shout out to our friends over at DataWeave, the most comprehensive, scalable, and accurate digital shelf analytics platform in the world. Their AI platform transforms the way consumer brands analyze and optimize their digital shelf, thereby enabling you to enhance how your products are represented, discovered, and sold online. DataWeave's suite of solutions is location aware, providing nationwide coverage across all digital shelf KPIs, including a comprehensive view of competition. These insights can be customized and integrated across various other systems and tools, enabling a seamless flow of information and insights across your organization. So elevate your brand with DataWeave and accelerate your e-commerce growth. Jamie, thanks so much for joining this week's episode of the CPG View. I've heard your name from a couple folks, and when I started to hear your name, we reached out and just so glad you took some time out of your busy schedule. We are, I believe, 7 hours apart, so it's Friday night at 7 p.m. or so your time, so I feel like I owe you a gift card or something for the inconvenience, but greatly appreciate it, you joining today. Before we get started, would you mind introducing yourself and the company you're with?
Sure. Thanks, Don, for having me. My name is Jamie. As Don mentioned, I am the Director of Growth Channels, which essentially means marketplaces at Dr. Squatch. Been in the role for about 3 years and kind of handle Amazon.com and all of our online retail platforms.
Very cool. Well, Jamie, your career spans strategy, consulting, high growth e-commerce, as well as CPG brands. Can you walk us through at a high level your journey and how some of these experiences shape your expertise with regards to some challenger brands?
Yeah, I think, I started my career as a management consultant, and I think it was really helpful to having had that start of like really analytical and strategic thinking. I kind of a couple years into my career, I switched to e-commerce, and I think what that allowed me to do was break down the challenge of scaling on e-commerce into very clear like levers. So I think, I learned early on in my e-commerce career that it's all about traffic and conversion rates and AOV and basically just like having a very clear way of breaking all that down, getting rid of the noise and just understanding the key metrics has been really pivotal in my career. I think, what it's taught me about growing a challenger brand is just like that you can there's some repeatable metrics that you can look to and scale things. So traffic is one of the core things that you need to grow if you want to grow. Kind of having a deep look at traffic and what's driving that has been really pivotal to the success, not just like Dr. Squatch, but of other brands to work with too.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think also to your perspective, it is interesting how that I would imagine your time in management consulting did provide a great basis for you from a strategic perspective of being able to almost take an outside in view of the market, probably a very clear and maybe somewhat linear approach to strategy and strategic thinking. I could certainly see how that would translate to your career and likely much of the success you've had outside of also being, I'm sure, just an awesome leader and a human. So, well, cool. I wanted to ask you, at Dr. Squatch, you oversee marketplaces as well as omni-channel growth. What's been one of your proudest accomplishments in the role thus far?
Yeah, so I think, I've been working very closely with the cross-functional team to think about what omni-channel means. Like the cross-functional team's been thinking very carefully about what omni-channel growth means for our brand. We're very present in retail. We have a massive D2C presence, and then of course we have Amazon. I think one of the successes we've seen on Amazon in the last year is just really strong growth. And that was really a result of those cross-functional efforts. A lot of very strong top of funnel marketing done by our brand team, building on all of the success that our D2C stores had over the last few years, which helps us build that brand awareness. I think it was really it just made it very obvious to me that like building a brand on Amazon, you can't do it on Amazon alone, right? You've got to really have it supported by top of funnel marketing, brand building off platform. And I'm super proud of what the team's managed to achieve in the last year. I think we're certainly seeing the results on some of our channels.
Yeah, I would certainly agree. And, I've just as a consumer, I've also witnessed it myself. And it's certainly no easy feat to navigate some of these global marketplaces, being able to balance to some of your earlier points, traffic conversion, AOV, profitability metrics, et cetera. So you all are certainly doing a nice job. I wanted to ask you, profitability and growth strategy, I think I read is two areas that I like the term superpowers. I don't know if everyone loves those terms. Some people say, hey, maybe too strong, but I really believe the simplicity of that. And also thinking back when we were kids, what are the few things you're really just, really good at that you can lean into? And I would believe that, those two are yours, profitability and growth strategy. What advice would you give to emerging consumer brands looking to break through the noise on Amazon and probably broader marketplaces for that perspective?
Yeah. I mean I'll tell you what I know from my over a decade of working in e-commerce is the brands that win are the brands that are driving very strong organic awareness, that have built their brand off the platform. It's very, anyone can spend on paid media and pay-per-click marketing and rise to the top, but your conversion rates or your click-through rates and your conversion rates are going to be terrible if you haven't built your brand off platform. I mean, I already kind of made this point in the last question, but what I've learned is like you've got to take a data-driven approach to figuring out what works for your brand, what marketing channels work for your brand, what awareness builders work for your brand, and you know kind of synchronize your paid efforts with your organic efforts. So making sure your brand shows up really well on a platform is key to breaking through the noise and growing on marketplaces.
Yeah, to that point, and it's also too. I don't know if you've seen this. It's a fine balance between obviously organic traffic and e-commerce is a keyword phrase and keyword phrase game, if you will. And, that balance between, sponsored traffic versus organic traffic. And, what I've seen over the years is those that can optimize their organic traffic as much as possible while I don't want to say marginalizing, but making sure they have very clear means and metrics in place to optimize organic and then slowly wean off of inorganic or sponsored placement is a way for a better charted path for sustained profitability and growth. Where I've seen I don't know if you've seen this, but where I typically have seen an inverse of that to be true is where you have brands that just, are disproportionately high in sponsored placements, very low and anemic in organic, and they just don't really have a sustainable model and a funnel for sustained profit and growth.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the brands that are really winning, they're winning, like a big part of the reason they're winning is because they have a lot of branded search. That you don't achieve that through advertising on Amazon. That is all work that's done with platform. If you have a look at the fastest growing brands on Amazon and you compare their branded search to the category searches, it's just wild how many people are searching for those brands as modifiers to their search. So I think, like to go back to the message for people for people in challenger brands, I think like Amazon is a really attractive platform. It's a massive addressable market, but you can't scale on Amazon without doing really good work off Amazon. Not today, at least, not in 2025.
Yeah, completely agree. Well, I wanted to ask you, you've built a reputation for streamlining processes and as well as leading cross-functional teams. Any insights you could share with the audience of how do you balance the fast pace of e-commerce with ensuring long-term sustainable growth?
I think what's super helpful and certainly part of our process and has always been part of my process of how I approach kind of driving results with the team is being super clear on what we're trying to achieve. And usually that's a revenue growth target or a market share target or something along those lines of a growth target. And then breaking that down into all of the components and really getting alignment at that level with the cross-functional team so that everyone understands, okay, if we want to grow, we need to drive subscribers or we need to boost up our AOVs by using bundling or something like that. And getting alignment on like from the top down, what are we trying to achieve? What does that entail from a true metric standpoint? And then like what are the initiatives that are going to support that? That's always been a super important part of the process that I've used wherever I've worked. And I don't think everyone's necessarily doing that, but I think, wherever I go, I certainly will take that approach. I think that's been the cornerstone of my approach to, like, whenever I come onto a new company is kind of break down what the goals and the metrics, and then like make sure everyone's aligned at that level of actionability.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, a couple of things there, to your very last point you just made, actionability, and I would say even accountability. It's almost that old notion of if everybody owns it, nobody owns it in terms of clear, deliverables. And I don't mean from like a culture perspective, but I mean from to your specific point of, hey, what's our objective? What are we trying to achieve? And whether that's a revenue target, a margin target, a what have you. And then what very clear, actionable steps are we going to take to achieve that? And to sub buckets, or whether you call them OKRs or whether you call them any other type of term, but very clearly defined deliverables that tree up to the broader ambition, and then with clear sets of owners for each one of those. And with you past life of management consultings, oftentimes called work streams, non-consulting, just called what are the objectives and key results, but same type of thing. And then, to clear owners. That's one of the things I've seen. And, inclusion is great for sure. But when it comes to driving accountability and process, there typically, what I've found, needs to be one driver that is owning that thing, for lack of a better term. So I wanted to ask you, Jamie, what excites you the most about helping brands scale on platforms like Amazon, like Walmart.com, and how do you see marketplaces evolving over the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, like, the anecdote that I can give is how absolutely excited I was when I started working in e-commerce for management consulting, because I think I was really hungry to own a P&L, and there's no better place to do that than in an e-commerce company, because you see immediate results in your actions. So that's always been a super exciting aspect to me of working in e-commerce, and certainly working in the job I have now is it's just how I think everyone in e-commerce can relate to this, how quickly you see results, and how it's a great place to like test, and to get into a testing and learning mindset. So that's what, I mean, still excites me 10 years later after I started working in e-commerce, is just like being able to come in every day and say what we did yesterday drove results and we're seeing growth or not, and then figuring out what works. But the timelines in other industries are much longer than that, so it's always super exciting to see such quick results. I What was the second part of your question?
Yeah, no, how do you see marketplaces evolving over the next few years?
Yeah, so how I see marketplaces evolving over the next few years is becoming even more of an extension of what brands are doing off platform. I think there's a lot of noise going on about how AI is going to influence marketplaces, and that's all certainly gonna happen. But the trend that I'm seeing, and this is a theme in this conversation, is really a trend towards marketplaces being a platform for branding and brands and strong brands. And I think, the way that Amazon is evolving in their use of A+ content, sponsored brand video, DSP off platform, I think all of that is really speaking to this notion of it's really becoming a brand's playground, where customers are going on, they're searching, they're looking for brands, they want to see the brand that they know represented there. And I think it's going to become much less of like just a commoditized platform where you can type in anything and just find commodities, to a platform where it'll be like shopping at a department store.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I agree with you. The level of sophistication, the level of curation, and just the level of capabilities and opportunities has increased, but also the need for top level talent who can navigate it successfully. And to your earlier point in this question, it was, the immediate impact that can be felt in e-commerce is like, in my opinion, and sounds like similar to you, that's what's quite enjoyable about the channel versus as opposed to maybe a larger brick and mortar channel with significantly long lead times for pod resets or shelf resets, et cetera. But what I've always likened the e-commerce channel, which in the US at least is about 15% of total sales, 15 to 20, depending on who you ask and what's included, but roughly. And I've always likened it to a jet ski, and the brick and mortar business was, at 80% or so was like a very large tanking, like a vessel, a cargo vessel. But as time has gone on, it's actually the jet ski's gotten much larger, and the profit contribution of that much larger or much faster moving vehicle has gotten larger. Sometimes many companies to the tune of, 2/3 of their growth might be associated with e-commerce as opposed to brick and mortar. So the ability for operators in this space to be able to go back to your very first point, have a data-driven approach with regards to how they can navigate the channel. I think that really is what separates the winners from the losers in my perspective of observing, hundreds of brands over my time. So I agree with you. I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, I think like just riffing on what you're saying, I think there's like the brands that are making it work because they're thinking omni-channel. They're thinking, how do we do retail and Amazon and direct to consumer? And like, because I mean, there's each one of those channels has its own addressable market, and you want to be ubiquitous to a customer, right? Like you might market to them and you might have a linear TV ad and they get to know your brand, and then you hit them with a Facebook ad, and then they maybe visit your D2C site, or they see you in Walmart, and then they start purchasing from you, and then they want to repurchase and they go into Amazon. So you kind of have to have that like full, even if your customers aren't cross-shopping, you want to make sure your brand tells a story across all of the platforms. And like that's, I think, what having a solid retail strategy, having a solid D2C strategy, and having a solid Amazon strategy, I think is what the brands that are doing it really well seem to be doing.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think of the old saying, I'm sure you're familiar with, but a lot of us are as well. As I might get it wrong because it's late in the day on a Friday, but tactics without strategy is a daydream, and strategy without tactics is a nightmare. And
Yeah.
to your point, really all actions should flow from strategy and choices made very much upfront and clearly defined. And where I've seen a lot of churn and maybe thrashing is, businesses or maybe operators that have not clearly defined their strategy for the various channels which you just mentioned, and then holistically their strategy. So there's a lot of reaction to opportunities that come forth, but it's not connected to any larger strategy. So you kind of make 3 steps forward over here and you make 6 steps back. And that's one thing I've seen a good bit of. Well, Jamie, I wanted to ask you, one, I wanted to say thank you so much for taking some time out of your schedule. Greatly appreciate it. And then two, I wanted to ask if there's anything you'd like to leave the audience with today.
I think, I mean, I like whether you're an Amazon leader or at a CPG brand, and Amazon is just part of your strategy. What I would urge brands to do is continue thinking through how does their brand translate on all the different platforms, and how do you build a memorable brand. All the brands that I've ever seen really grow all have some level of memorability, and they've managed to pull that through to the marketplace platforms that they end up growing and thriving on. So I would urge you to take frequent steps back and ask how your brand is being translated onto the different channels where you want to succeed.
Awesome. Well, Jamie, thank you so much. Hope you have a lovely weekend.
Thanks, Don. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the CPG View, the #1 CPG information source for global omni-channel leaders.